What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. As you can see, today we are off the bike again. That's because it's going to be another how-to video. This is going to be another oil change video, but the reason why I'm making another one, even though I already have an oil change video, is because this bike takes a different oil filter than the Honda CBR 250R. See, there's really kind of two different types of oil changes, I guess you can say, not including Harley Davidson and their primary, secondary, and all that stuff. There's the internal one, which was like the Honda CBR 250R, and then there is the canister one. These are honestly my favorite to do because they are pretty much like a car. See, all the cars I've done so far have this style filter, which is just basically like a canister, and they're really simple to do. For example, on this one, and pretty much any bike that uses this type of filter, all you're going to do is put the bike on a rear stand, undo the drain bolt, let the oil drain, find your oil filter, undo that, let the oil drain, put the drain bolt back on, put the new oil filter, fill it back up, turn on the bike, let the oil circulate, and then fill it up again. And that's pretty much it. It's really simple. Honestly, I love this style of filter, and I'm glad this bike has it. From what I can tell so far, a lot of super sports have the internal filters, and a lot of naked bikes or some V-twins that are not Harley Davidson have this style of filter. So if doing your oil change is important to you, and doing a very easy one is very important to you, look for this style of oil filter on your motorcycle. Now, for an oil change on this style bike, you're only going to need a handful of tools, and honestly, some of these are optional. Obviously, you're going to need your oil, you're going to need a funnel, your oil filter, a ratchet, and then a socket for the drain bolt. And that's really all you need. The reason why I have this little socket is because I do need to, on this bike, I do need to remove this horn. Well, I don't need to move it. It's just easier to get to the oil filter, which is right there, if I remove this horn, and it gives me a little more room to play with. And then this is an oil filter wrench, which you use to grab the used oil filter, the old one. Never use this on a new one. That's what this is for, if you need it. This is only for old ones because this will destroy the filter. Now, the only other thing you're going to need is a rear stand. And with that said, let's get into it. If it's your first time using a rear stand, you may want to ask for some help with keeping the bike balanced. Remember to have the bike in neutral. The bike needs to be able to roll back to get onto the stand. Lastly, double check to make sure that the swing arm is seated properly on the stand before proceeding. So now that we got the bike on the rear stand, we can get started on the oil change. Now, for the Honda CBR 919, Honda CB 900F, Honda 919 Hornet, the millions of names that this bike has, this is a 2005. You can find the oil drain bolt on the left-hand side, right next to the exhaust pipe. So getting the oil drain bolt off on this bike is pretty easy. You have plenty of room to get to it and plenty of room to work. So for this bolt, you're gonna need a 17mm socket, a little bit of an extension wrench to give you some torque, and a ratchet. So once you get it loose, you can go ahead and just do the rest by hand. Now be careful, the oil will be hot because you should be doing this at operating temperature. Now, while the oil is draining out of the oil pan, you can get started on the oil filter. Now, as you can see, the oil filter is really easy to get to. Unlike fully faired motorcycles, you don't have to take anything off. It's right here, right in front, for you to get a good grip on and remove. Now, every bike has a little bit of obstacles on the way to get to the oil filter. This is probably one of the easiest, but this one was pretty stuck because, like I said in the beginning, this is the first time I've done this oil change. So I did have to utilize my oil filter wrench. Now, like I said, you don't have to use this if you've done the oil change yourself because you should not have over tightened it, and you should change it frequent enough so it doesn't get stuck. Now, because I did have to use this wrench and I couldn't do it by hand, this horn kind of got in the way. So we're gonna go ahead and remove it. So if you need to remove it, you know how to. So removing this horn is very, very easy. All you have is one bolt, which is located up here at the top, and that bolt takes a 12mm socket. So all you're gonna do is get around here. All you gotta do is loosen it. And like I said, most of the time when you break a bolt loose, all you have to do is do the rest by hand. And it comes off that easy. Now, because this thing is relatively heavy and it is hanging off these very thin wires, you don't want to just leave it dangling like that, because you can hit it, tear it, all sorts of stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of duct tape and tape the horn to one of the header pipes. And that's going to give it some support so it's not hanging off its own weight. Now, like I said, I did have to use this wrench in order to take it off. So it's already hand loose. I can loosen it by hand. But just to kind of give you a little example of what you got to do is basically it's just a pair of vice pliers. All you do is put it around the filter, doesn't matter where, clamp down, sometimes with both hands, and use it in order to give you some added leverage. Now, like I did say in the beginning, these are only for used filters because it will damage it, which it did damage this one, and I'll show you as soon as we take it off. But before we take off the filter, we have one other little obstacle with this bike. As you can see, the oil filter is right in between the header pipes. So, as soon as we loosen this oil filter and the oil starts coming out, it's going to get all over our header pipes, which is going to be a pain in the ass to clean. So what I'm going to do, or what I was going to do, is I was going to use some aluminum foil to kind of make a barrier and a funnel to help the oil come out, but I don't have any aluminum foil, so we're going to go ahead and use a plastic bag. So just give me a second to mess around with this a little bit and we'll get going. My plan is to create a little funnel and use the space that was between the header pipes to kind of guide the oil down into the pan. So I think I got it, and we're gonna loosen this up and hopefully it works. If not, I'm gonna have a mess to clean later. So let's just go ahead and loosen this filter. It's on there a little harder than I thought it was gonna be. All right. As you can see, the oil's falling in the plastic and coming out right here. So far so good. And as far as the damage that the wrench causes, as you can see right here, you have a nice scrape and a pretty good dent, as well as on the other side where the wrench grabs. And this is not the sort of thing you want on a new filter. So like I said, never use an oil filter wrench to put on a filter. So now that all the oil has fully drained, we can clean this up a little bit and get our new filter ready. So if you're going to be using K&N, the oil filter for the Honda 919 is going to be KN2041. Now first we got to just take this plastic off on the top. And then there are a lot of things that people say you should do, or a lot of things people like to do when putting on a new oil filter. One of them is putting some oil on the top along the seal, and also filling up the oil filter a little bit with oil so that way when you start it up you're not on a 100% dry start. Now this one kind of looks like it already has some oil along the rim, but since I'm used to filling these things up a little bit with oil, that's what we're gonna do. So we're just gonna fill it up a little bit like that, get a little bit of the oil, rub it around the rim, and then install it. And it really is that simple. All you have to do is put these things on hand tight. You don't want to over torque them or anything like that. The seal should do the rest. Once you turn the bike on, if it starts leaking oil, just turn off the bike, tighten it a little bit more by hand, and then that's all you need. Then we're just gonna put the horn back on. That's it, we're done with the oil filter change. Now all we gotta do is put the oil drain bolt back on, fill this thing back up with oil. Simple as that. So now that you got your oil filter on, you can go ahead and put your drain bolt back on. Just a reverse of what you did earlier. Just go ahead and put it in the hole. Try to figure out where it is gonna grab at. And then once it does, just go ahead and hand tighten it. I usually do it until it seats, which is right there. Now, of course, this bolt does have a torque spec, but I've been doing oil changes long enough to know that a good hand tightening is all it really needs. I'll go ahead and annotate the torque spec for you guys, but I'm just gonna go ahead and do this by hand, and you guys can just go ahead and do this by hand as well if you don't have a torque wrench. All you gotta do is tighten it till it seats and give it a little bit more of a push. And again, as always, the bike will let you know if it's too loose by leaking oil. Now, before we start filling this up, just want to make sure you clean off the header pipes wherever oil might have touched, or else your bike is going to smell like burnt oil for a little while. So you got your new oil filter on and your drain bolt back on. Next step is to open up the oil filler cap. Put in your funnel, and then you're going to start filling it with oil. Once you're ready to start filling, you're going to want to locate your sight glass, and you're going to want to keep an eye on these two lines. The bottom one is basically means that you're low or empty, and the top one is the one we're aiming for. You're going to want to fill it up with oil up until it gets to that point, and you're going to want to do so slowly, because at this point it's a lot easier to add oil. It's a lot harder to get it out right now. So slowly add your oil. On one quick note, because I realized this the other day when I went to buy oil, if you've never done any sort of oil change and you want to, you may not realize that you can just go to, for motorcycle purposes, Cycle Gear, and tell them what kind of bike you have, and they'll be able to tell you what kind of oil, how much oil, and what kind of filter you need. So if you've never changed oil before and you're a little embarrassed to go to the auto parts store / Cycle Gear because you don't know what you need, that's what they're there for. So don't feel embarrassed. And then that's okay for now, because we still got to turn on the bike, let it circulate, and then we'll do the final fill up. You want to make sure before you turn back on your bike that you put the oil filter cap back on, and then let's go turn it on. Again, make sure your bike is in neutral when it's on the rear stand, because you do not want to accidentally stall it on the stand, because you may cause the bike to jump, causing it to fall off the stand, causing a not so good time. After you let the bike run for about 15 to 20 seconds, go ahead and turn it back off. Reopen your oil filter cap, put your funnel back in, and start filling it back to proper level. As you can see, the oil is pretty much empty out of there. If you stop here and don't turn on the bike and call it a day, this is how you're going to be running your bike. Which, if you can see it barely coming up above this line right there, is pretty damn empty. So this is why you always want to make sure you turn on the bike, let it circulate the system, fill up all the little crevices it needs to, and then add more oil. And that right there looks good enough to me, so we're going to go ahead and stop there. And once you've reached this point, congratulations, you have just changed your oil. All you got to do is put that oil filter cap back on and call it a day. And as always, the most important step of any oil change is properly disposing your used oil. Never throw your used oil down a drain or in the trash can. Your new oil container makes a great used oil container. And like I said before, at least here in the United States, you can always take your used oil to any automotive shop like AutoZone or O'Reilly's, and they will dispose of it for free. And that's going to wrap up this video. I hope it was helpful and informative. If you guys have any questions regarding your oil changes, feel free to drop them down in the comments. I'll be more than happy to help. And until next time, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.